In this scene, we're going to be talking about physical development in our infants and toddlers. So basically, we're talking about from 0 until 2. Um, so this age group is really pretty cool. They've got a lot of fun stuff going on, as we'll see in the next couple of units. So this one's physical development, the next one will be cognitive development, so thinking development, which also includes language. And then we'll talk about social and emotional development, which will include attachment and bonding and all sorts of stuff. But so first we're talking about physical development. So things we can talk about here are physical milestones during the 0 to 2s. So, baby is typically first able to roll over by themselves. And I want you to really think about this. And when I taught this face to face, a lot of times what I had students do is start out, we all had to, if physically possible, lay on the floor and pretend like we couldn't move because that's, baby, right? They can't intentionally do anything for themselves. And then eventually they learn to roll over. And rolling over is a precursor to being able to sit up by ourselves. But really, if you think about it, rolling is their first ability towards locomotion, towards movement. And I've seen some of these little people that once they learn to roll, they will like roll towards whatever it is that they're super interested in. Um, so we see them rolling. They'll learn to either roll from back to front first or front to back. And there's strategies if you want to help them with their muscle development so that they can learn to do this. And really, a lot of what's going on relates to muscle development, giving them the opportunity to then use the brain, which is also developing, to control their physical movement. So we will see them rolling, we'll see them sitting assisted. So, they also sell all sorts of stuff, Bumby chairs and boppies and all these things that you can use to help your child sit assisted. You could also just, sit on the floor, what the kids call crisscross applesauce, and like put them in your lap and, read a board book with them, and this can help them with their muscle control. So there's lots of things that we can do that we don't really have to pay for. And if you Google, strategies for helping baby to learn to sit up, you'll see lots of information about that. So once they're able to sit, then they'll start to kind of use their hands to sit forward. And then, so it's almost like the knees are on the floor, the hands are on the floor type deal. And a lot of times they will, I call it rebbing. So they'll like kind of rock back and forth while their hands are on the floor and their knees are on the floor. So they're kind of like revving, ready to go, right? Um, and then sometimes we see that some of these kids will do what some people call scooting, which is where they kind of drag themselves around. No leg motion involved as much as like literally these guys are using their arms to pull themselves around. And my youngest did that for the longest time. I was like, are you going to crawl? Because crawling actually has some really important skills, like, coordinating arm and leg movement and, upper body muscular development and muscular development. Like, we kind of really want to do that. We don't want to skip that. And one of the things that I learned in working at early intervention, we had an amazing team, and one of our team members was a physical therapist. And so she had talked about the importance of all of the skills, including, crawling and things like that. And she said if a kid skips a skill, we really need to kind of encourage them to go back to it and to, get that skill down, because there's so many things involved with that skill that, like we talked about, coordinating movement, things like that. Um, So then once they can crawl, they can start to, they will generally start to crawl to something that will allow them to pull to stand. And then they will do kind of two things or work on two things at once. One, being able to stand unassisted, and then also cruising, which is basically using whatever's available to them, the furniture, a dog, whatever, to move around and get to what they're interested in. So it's kind of like if you've ever been roller skating for the first time and you see like all these kids in roller skates hugging the wall and they're moving, but they're staying upright because of the fact that they're hanging onto the wall. That's what we would call cruising. And eventually baby will be able to stand unassisted, and then will be able to move a leg while standing unassisted, and then typically they will start walking. I've talked to so many parents that are just like, I just want them to do XYZ. I'm like, really? You don't. Because once they start moving, it's on. Like, you have to literally be watching these people 24/7 so that you can make sure that they're not doing something that could hurt them. Like, I don't want to say this in a joking sort of way because I know it sounds bad, but they are literally, it's almost like they're literally on a mission to hurt themselves, and you have to make sure that doesn't happen. So we're talking about, like sticking fingers in outlets, sticking fingers in the dog's mouth, eating things that they shouldn't be, putting things in their mouths, which we'll talk about. One of the reasons why they do that is because their ability to sense in their mouth is really good, and so they want to kind of test out objects by putting them in their mouths. Um, but once they can coordinate movement from holding onto something, so usually we start with the ulnar grasp, which is holding onto things like this. So they will grab your hair and hold like this. And what a lot of people don't understand is that ulnar grasp, a lot of kids, they don't have the ability to let go. If you say to them, okay, now it's time to let go, it's like, yes, they've developed this skill, but they haven't developed this skill yet. And so a lot of times, you'll get earrings. This is when we really want to be careful with like earrings, necklaces, things like that, because they will just grab and pull. And it's not in a mean or malintentioned way. It is just, they don't have the ability to let go yet. And so after they've gone through the ulnar grasp, then they'll go through the pincer grasp. Sometimes they'll start with this. I could jokingly call that the Pac-Man. And then usually it's these two fingers, using stuff to pick up. What else have we got going on? Feeding. So obviously we're starting feeding with either breastfeeding or formula feeding, or combo feeding. So if mom wants to breastfeed but isn't producing enough milk, then baby may need extra supplement. So combo feeding will be where it's at, which is basically breast and formula feeding. And basically, I mean, these guys, until they start eating solid food, all they need is either breast milk or formula. That's it. They don't need any water. They don't need anything like that. And so usually somewhere around 4 to 5 months, you'll start to notice it's really kind of funny. So we've got baby sitting in high chair with us, or like we're sitting and eating, we've got baby on our lap, right? And we're like taking our fork and we're bringing it to our mouths. And a lot of times when they're ready to start solid foods, what they'll do is watch you eat intently. And they're like, how is she doing that? You can almost see the wheels turning. And then eventually what they'll do is they'll like watch it go from your plate to your mouth. And then sometimes once they get to that point, then as soon as it gets to your mouth, they'll like open their mouths like, now you feed me, right? And so this is the point where we think to ourselves, okay, maybe this baby is interested in some solid foods. They also have a thrusting reflex that makes it so that solids do not stay in their mouths. And it's kind of like it just pushes everything out. And this is why drinking is easier for them at the beginning. So once they're not doing that as much or at all anymore, then they're going to be more capable of first foods. First food is usually going to be cereal. So it could be, they make like baby cereal. It's a really weird texture and has a very bad taste, or actually very little taste. Let me put it that way. Because being me and my husband, everything that like our first child taste had for food, we were like, I wonder what that tastes like. And we like, ooh, it's very bland, but okay, whatever. So yeah, we will start with first food of usually rice cereal. And it is a mess. It is a mess. And a lot of times they want to try to feed themselves. So what will end up happening is they will grasp the food and try to push the food into their mouths. So they've got ulnar grasp going on, right? And they're like, grab the food and shove it into their mouths. Baby's covered in oatmeal now. And you're like, wow, we got about, a couple spoonfuls in you. That's good. Wait till they start their first fruits. Because then you're going to have, all sorts of colors involved in the face painting. And it's not just face painting, it's also like cloth painting and area painting. When I first started learning about baby development when I was a nanny in undergrad and graduate school, one of the moms that I nannied for had a tarp underneath the baby seat. And whenever she fed baby, there would be a blue tarp underneath the baby seat, underneath the seat where the baby was eating, so that it wouldn't get on the floor. They didn't have dogs. We have dogs. Dogs are very helpful for this usually. So just an FYI. But yeah, infant feeding of rice cereal can be messy because this is brand new for them. Think about it. They've never had a spoon put in their mouth before. It's always been a nipple or a bottle. And so we, learn as adults how to effectively do this. And then eventually they'll want to, hold on to a spoon while you're feeding them with the spoon. Sometimes it just turns into like, no, will you just open your mouth. Let me please just get the food in the body. Get the food in the body. So we'll start with rice cereal. We'll go to fruits, but not super sweet ones, because then anything after that they will not want to eat because it's not as sugary. We'll go to veggies, and there's a lot of companies make staged foods, and they'll tell you this is a first food, this is a second food. You can also Google it and see what do pediatricians recommend as first foods and things like that. I will tell you, once baby starts eating food, the diaper becomes different, and there's different smells that come from baby. Yeah. The American Board of Pediatrics encourages women who are breastfeeding to breastfeed for at least a year. One thing that our book does not talk about that typically influences, or maybe one of the influences as to why people don't breastfeed for as long as they intended to, is the advent of teeth. So once baby starts to get teeth, some babies do use them on the breast, and it can be uncomfortable up to painful. And so sometimes people stop breastfeeding once baby's what they call teeth erupt. That sounds great, right? But that's what they call it. Eruption of teeth. And usually it's the first two teeth are here, and then the second two teeth are here, and then they kind of go out from there. So what's guiding all of this developmental stuff? We've got the brain, which has already been, the building blocks are there. There's already neurons there. Neurons are the cells that make up our brain and spinal cord, and then nerves come into the spinal cord part as well. And so these brain cells, these neurons, actually increase as we are learning. So the more we learn, the more connections the neurons that we have make, and the more connections, the more we're able to do stuff. So we want to stimulate children mentally, physically, showing them things, having them have sensory experiences so that they can develop these connections between these neurons. Now, as they are getting a little bit older, the fatty tissue that surrounds the axon on the neuron, which is called myelin, the myelin sheaths, more neurons are becoming fully myelinated, and that myelination helps to speed up the processing or the transmission of the neurochemical information in the brain. And then it also helps with making movement, especially less jagged and more defined and more coordinated. So brain development requires nutrition. Brain development requires sensory experiences, physical experiences, sleep. And so all of those things are going to be especially important in those first 2 years of life. You will have multiple pediatrician visits. They're called well child visits during the first 2 years. And many times they are to do things such as check height or length and weight, to make sure that they are increasing in height and weight at a expected or average level. If the child is not increasing in length and weight as we expect them to, they may be experiencing failure to thrive, which we would have to do some intervention about. And it's interesting to look at the child's growth curve. So most pediatricians will show you an average boys and girls growth curve. So it's kind of a line that goes, here, and then it goes up like that. And then they'll show you, where on the growth curve is your child, based upon their age, and based upon their sex. And you'll hear things like 50th percentile or 90th percentile. Basically means that, so my older son was born in the 92nd percentile for height and weight, which means that 8% of babies born at the same time that he was, or born at 38 weeks, let's put it that way, only 8% of babies were bigger than him. So if we have a baby who is at the 50th percentile, that means that 50% or half of kids who are born at that age range are going to be bigger than them. So my youngest was a 50th percentile for weight. But also, if you remember, he was born at 34 weeks, so that would make sense. And it's interesting because they will continue to follow kids as they age. And you'll continue to hear, that they're at the 80th percentile or the 50th percentile or the 40 or 20 or something like that. So what we also see is that for the most part, growth can be pretty consistent, meaning that if your child was at the 92nd percentile for when they were born, then they will most likely continue to be 92nd percentile throughout childhood. So my 92nd percentile infant is now 13, and he is 6'5". So yeah, he's actually at the 100th percentile for height. There's very few other 13-year-olds in the world that are taller than my 13-year-old. So we talked about brain development. And one of the things that's interesting about brain development, it's almost like as kids are popping out with these new behavioral observation things that they can, so things that we can observe, right? It's almost like we can tell what's developing inside the brain and inside the body based upon what baby is able to do now and what baby is working on. Um, so your medulla oblongata, which reminds me of the water boy, is all the way back here. And its job is to do balance and coordination. So obviously, as baby is learning all this balance stuff, we know that that's working super hard to, um, learn and to gain more connections and all that sort of stuff. Um, we also see that the sensory and perception abilities will change during this time. So usually the first 6 months are where we will see the biggest changes in vision. And it's always fun to test baby's vision by like standing really close to them and calling their name, and they'll look at you, and then taking a step back and calling their name and seeing if they like directly look at you or if they kind of look like around you, which indicates that like, yeah, I can't see you as well anymore. So that gives us as an adult, interacting with this child, the opportunity to see like how well, what is your vision at right now? Because I mean, we can't do the whole vision test with baby at this point. We do see that hearing is going to increase, and that the ability to hear different tones is going to increase. A lot of times, and we'll talk more about this in the next section, but a lot of times humans have this thing where we feel the need to talk to baby in like these high squeaky tones, like, "Hi, baby, you're so cute." And they do hear this better. And typically they do respond to that better. But we also want to, over time, kind of move away from that and start talking to them like we're talking to another human. Because once they start attempting to replicate language, because let me tell you right now, they are watching you. They're watching you. And they are trying, you'll see them, they'll try to like move their mouths in the same way that you do. And they're like, trying to figure out like, how do I make the sound come out of my mouth? She says things and things happen. How do I do this? Right? So they're really trying. And no, I'm not saying that babies are like thinking these things, but they recognize that sound comes out of her mouth and then things happen. Like, I want that to happen. So they're trying to replicate the noises that we make, and they're trying to figure out how the world works. They are little scientists. They're literally like cause and effect, trying to figure it out. And so once they're starting to do that, once they're watching you make sounds and then trying to like replicate facial movements, you want to stop that baby ease stuff, talking to baby like this, because otherwise you will have a child that talks like that. You don't want that, believe me. I've met multiple kids that talk like that, and then I see mom, babies, the baby kid is 4, and they're still talking like that, and mom's still talking like that to them, and I'm just like, you do realize you did that, right? Like that's all you right there. You realize you did that, right? So yeah, as soon as they start trying to replicate your facial movements, you want to talk to them as if they are just regular human having a conversation. Maybe a little bit slower. Maybe enunciate better so that they can see how your lips do the thing, how your tongue does the thing. But yeah, you want to stop with the whole talking to the baby like they're a baby thing, because, like I said, you do not want that. Um, I think there's another unit that's going to talk about vaccinations, but there will be a lot of discussion of vaccinations within the first couple of months. Actually, baby will get vaccinations before they leave the hospital. Um, some of them are like super important, like vaccinating for whooping cough so that they don't get sick, things like that. You want to make sure that anybody that comes in contact with your baby as soon as they get out of the hospital and come home is updated on their vaccines as well. Um, because if baby develops, RSV or whooping cough or something like that, it can be really problematic. So we want to make sure that people that are coming to visit us are healthy and have had their shots as well. There is some discussion over whether or not um, parents should make decisions about having certain vaccines. Uh, I will tell you right now that the vaccines, or the concerns that people have about vaccines, are based upon old research that is not found to be accurate. There is no connection between any sort of vaccines and autism. Um, and there's no connection between any sort of vaccines and negative outcomes. Now, here's the thing. You're going to talk to people and they're going to say, oh, well, I got my child vaccinated and then they developed autism. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that is in your genetics. I have had autism since before I was born. Both of my kids have had autism since before they were born. It is not the vaccine that makes them have autism. One thing that we do know is that one of the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella shots is given around the time that a lot of children are diagnosed with autism, because that's when they start to meet the diagnostic criteria for autism. So it isn't that the vaccine caused them to be diagnosed with autism. It's that they're now of the age where we can recognize the symptoms as problematic, as challenging, and help them work on them, as opposed to something causing those symptoms to come out. Um, so we definitely want to talk to our pediatrician about our concerns um, regarding vaccines, but we also want to make sure that we are making good decisions for ourselves and our family members about vaccines. Having people making poor decisions about vaccines historically in the past couple of years even has led to a increase in things that we had pretty much almost wiped out, because vaccinations were and if I remember correctly, it was like 92% of children were vaccinated at some point. And as of last year, it was 70%. But then, as the percentage of people who were fully vaccinated decreased, the number of people who were developing diseases that we thought that we had gotten rid of because of vaccines increased. So we definitely want to make sure that we are making the healthiest decisions for us and for our children regarding vaccinations and the vaccination schedule, which your pediatrician will discuss with you. And like I said, you will see that pediatrician multiple times within the first year, just to do well baby checks. Many of those, if you have insurance, are covered or free. So it's not like you're thinking to yourself like, oh, look, I have to bring them back to the pediatrician for another $25. A lot of them are covered completely for free. I know that we have an annual well child check now with the age of my kids. They're 11 and 13, and the annual is free, because our insurance thinks, it's important to go in and check in on what's going on. What else is in this chapter? Can't really think of anything else. They do have a lot of stuff talking about the importance of breastfeeding, and breastfeeding does provide benefits for baby, benefits for mom, um, but we also want to keep in mind that not everybody can do it. And so there are other strategies that we can use out there. Some people donate, if someone is a breast milk overproducer, they may donate their milk to a milk bank. Um, and some states allow this, some states don't. And you may be able to use donor milk with your child. We may see that some of our children may develop or have allergens. So let's say that you're a mom, you're breastfeeding, you ate something, it's going to go into your breast milk. And then baby is going to get some of that in the breast milk, right? If you notice that they, are getting a rash, or if, they have some sort of other allergic reaction, then you want to think to yourself, like, okay, what did I eat that or drink that perhaps baby could be allergic to. You may also see more spit up if they're allergic to something that was in breast milk. So it's just something to keep in mind, something to watch out for. I do know a lot of people who have celiac, who are gluten intolerant, that they obviously don't know if their children are gluten intolerant until the child can kind of let the adult know, hey, like when I eat that kind of bread, it makes my tummy feel really bad or really gassy or something like that. So a lot of times moms will, only eat gluten-free because they're worried that their child may be gluten intolerant as well. But obviously that's the best nutrition for mom. Um, so you may find that if you're formula feeding, certain formulas may not work out for you, that they may correlate with more spit up, more kind of projectile vomiting. You probably want to try a different formula. With my youngest, I ended up using this like super expensive tummy formula that was for, stomachs that really couldn't take other types of formula. It was like $27 a bottle. It was rather ridiculous. That's why I said find coupons. Um, Okay, I'm pretty sure that's all we've got in this unit. If you have questions about physical development for your 0 to 2s, feel free to put them in the comments here, or obviously in class, you can put them in the questions for the professor discussion or send me an email. Thanks.